When Medal of Honor hit the scene in the late 90s, it quickly became the dominant force in the World War II subgenre of FPS games. But then in 2003, Medal of Honor computer games started getting some fierce competition from a game titled Call of Duty. A year later, this competition found its way onto the console market when Spark Unlimited made a spin-off game for the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. That game was Call of Duty Finest Hour for the GameCube. One way that this game is different from the Medal of Honor games is that it takes more of an ensemble cast approach to a story rather than focus on the POV of one American soldier. Finest Hour chronicles some key battles from the European theater of the war from the perspectives of American, British, and Russian soldiers. Each time you start playing as someone different, that character gives a little monologue explaining how they ended up joining the effort to fight fascism and the importance of the mission you're taking on. It feels like it makes a great effort to develop the characters engaged in the war, which really adds to the war drama. You care more about your character because of knowing their backstory and motivations, even when you change characters and your previous one becomes an allied NPC. As a third-party GameCube game released in 2004, the graphics are pretty average. There are a lot of war ruins and drab colors, which makes sense, and they're complemented by good particle effects and animation, except in the faces. The facial animations are rather mediocre, which again isn't much of a surprise for the time. The frame rate does run smooth most of the time, but there are a few times where there's a lot happening like explosions and a lot of soldiers shooting that the frame rate gets noticeably sluggish. Again, it's not often, but it is one thing that the early 2000s Medal of Honor games handled better than this game. One thing's for sure though, this first console Call of Duty game goes all out on its sound design. While some of the voice acting can best be described as decent, the sound effects really pack a punch, especially for the stronger guns, and the music does its best to be as dramatic and epic as possible for a war shooter, especially for the sequences with a lot of soldiers fighting. Which is why it's a shame that some of those more graphically demanding parts run the risk of getting laggy frame rates. Unlike Medal of Honor, this Call of Duty game focuses much more on real battles from the war and just about no spy-like missions, so most of the time you have AI allies with you, and they're actually decent shots who kill enemies. You are still expected to do most of the work yourself, but this kind of AI for your allies was seen as a welcome change. What was also a welcome change from early Medal of Honor games was a checkpoint system, but they only happen when you get halfway through a level, so you can still find yourself slogging through the same parts of a level multiple times if you keep dying. And you can expect to die a lot because this game is actually pretty hard, especially towards the last levels of each of the 3 campaigns. There's no regenerative health like many COD players are used to now, and the enemies are very aggressive. They're weirdly accurate shots and they love to throw grenades. You can heal yourself with dropped medicine or med packs you can find and use later, but they can be hard to find if you're not really looking. It also doesn't help that you can only hold 2 guns of any kind at a time, which is part of the game trying to be more realistic. And that's just how the game is, because even though I searched, I couldn't find any way to adjust the difficulty. Finest Hour wants you to earn your way to the end. Clearly by the difficulty and the tone, this game is trying to be much more serious and realistic than later COD games would be with all their sci-fi weapons and wisecracking soldiers. Despite its high level of difficulty, Finest Hour makes an honest effort to improve the FPS genre with its controls. Of course, you can melee with your gun in hand, which by this point had become standard thanks in part to Medal of Honor, but in Call of Duty you can aim down sights, which was a big change from the FPS norm back then. And when you see how it makes it easier to land accurate shots, it's clearer why the ability to aim down your sights became the standard in big budget shooters going forward. The controls themselves are kind of floaty, but not necessarily in a bad way. More in a way that aiming actually feels easier and not so stiff like other shooters of the time. What also helps with your aiming is a red indicator that lights up whenever your bullet makes contact with an enemy. This really helps you know that you're aiming well, so if you don't see the red mark, you can adjust your aiming until you do. This way you don't waste bullets on the air. This mechanic didn't become standard like aiming down sights, but there's good reason for other shooters incorporating such similar mechanics. When I first played this in my early teens, I didn't know enough about the gaming industry to know that this game came to other platforms with a multiplayer mode. For some reason, the GameCube version disappointingly has no multiplayer at all. Granted, the GameCube was not a console to go to for online play, but the developers could have at least added a 4-player split-screen mode, even if they didn't include bots. The fact that they didn't bother doing that much when other versions had multiplayer really hurts the overall package of this game. Even though the single player is admittedly a very compelling interactive historical drama. That's 1 point for Medal of Honor. Prices for used copies of this tend to vary between $13 and $30, but I've seen some people try to sell their copies for over $100. Don't spend that kind of money on this game. But if you're a fan of retro war shooters and you find this within that $13 to $18 range, then it's a game worth buying. Well, that's my review of Call of Duty Finest Hour for the GameCube. To help me produce more videos like this, please support my Patreon page. Special thanks to my current patrons here. Remember that supporting my Patreon gets your name in the credits and access to my main videos a day early. Also be sure to watch my previous reviews of Medal of Honor Frontline for the GameCube and Call of Duty Black Ops 2 for the Wii U. See you all next time!
Scratch 2 Panzers!